At 2:47 in the morning, my phone lit up with a message from my husband. "I'm at Evelyn's house. Pick me up or it's over." I typed back without hesitation, "Then it's over." Exactly 1 minute later, I forwarded his location to Evelyn's husband. By sunrise, my now ex stood on my doorstep, eyes red, clothes rumpled, desperation clinging to him like smoke. That was the moment I realized something life-changing. Peace tastes far sweeter than revenge. At 2:48 a.m., Nathan Hart's voice came through my phone, calm and steady despite the chaos. "Your husband is at my house with my wife." He was calling from Dubai International Airport, yet somehow he sounded more composed than I felt. Just a minute earlier, I had sent him the location pin that proved what both of us must have already known. I'd expected a pleading call from Dominic, an apology, an excuse, anything. Instead, I got Nathan's quiet steadiness. "How long have you known?" he asked. "About 60 seconds longer than you," I replied, staring at Dominic's final message, still glowing on the screen. "Pick me up or it's over." Truth was, it had been over for months. This was just the formal declaration neither of us had dared to say aloud. 3 weeks earlier, I'd sat beside Dominic at my mother's dining table, pretending our marriage was something worth saving. That Sunday dinner still haunts me, not for what occurred, but for how desperately I'd tried to ignore what was right in front of me. My mother, Vera, had prepared her famous pot roast, the one she only made for special occasions. She kept praising us, raising her glass and saying, "For years next month. You two make me believe in love again." Dominic squeezed my hand under the table, his palm damp. Now I know it wasn't affection, it was guilt. His phone buzzed every few minutes, and each time he'd glance at it, type a quick reply, then carve another slice of meat as if nothing were wrong. But I noticed the subtle tension in his shoulders, the slight delay in his laughter when my brother Trevor told one of his endless fishing stories. The performance was unraveling. I just refused to see it. Before continuing, I want to pause this story of betrayal and liberation. If you believe no woman should ever receive a 2:47 a.m. ultimatum from a cheating husband, please subscribe. It's free and helps more people find these stories of truth and strength. That same week, I discovered the receipt. It fell from his jacket while I did laundry. M.O. and Shandon, $12,743, purchased at 11:47 p.m. on a Tuesday. He had claimed he was working late, fixing a server crash at the office. The paper was crumpled, shoved deep into the pocket like a secret meant to stay hidden. I stood there holding it, my stomach tightening. Not heartbreak, not yet, just the heavy awareness that I had been choosing blindness over clarity. I slipped the receipt into my purse, said nothing during dinner, and watched him act the part of a devoted husband while my family applauded the illusion. He poured my wine with care, told the story of how we met at a gallery opening 5 years earlier, his hand resting lightly on my shoulder as he described falling in love at first sight. My mother smiled so widely. My father nodded with quiet approval. Trevor's wife, Elise, sighed and said we were couple goals. I tasted irony in every bite of food. Everyone believed the image we projected, including me. In truth, our mornings had already become the clearest evidence of decay. Dominic still brewed coffee for both of us, but now he angled his phone away as he scrolled through messages. Our goodbye kisses had shrunk into quick, meaningless gestures. He'd begun showering at night, filling the apartment with a cologne too sharp, too deliberate to be for sleep. "Big presentation tomorrow," he'd murmur, walking to the bathroom at 10 p.m., phone in hand. I'd lie in bed listening to the water running far longer than necessary, wondering if he was messaging her behind that locked door. Even the scent that drifted out, a new body wash, expensive and foreign, told me he was transforming into someone else. Someone who was no longer mine. The company's summer picnic should have been my wake-up call. 2 months before that early morning message, we gathered at Green Lake Park for volleyball and barbecue. Nathan Hart had introduced his wife, Evelyn, with proud affection, his arm draped around her shoulders as he called her his better half. She greeted me with a smile that was too polished, too brief, her eyes sliding away the moment we shook hands. When Dominic began retelling his favorite story about the Peterson account, the one that supposedly kept him late at work, Evelyn laughed like she'd been there. Her hand rested on his arm, and she didn't move it while pointing out the dessert table. Such a small thing, yet I felt the truth sink into me. Later, during volleyball, they shared a look across the net. Not just a glance, a look charged with history, secrets, and understanding. Dominic missed the ball because he couldn't stop staring at her. Everyone laughed except me. Standing there under the July sun, sweating through my sundress, I realized exactly why he'd insisted on attending a company picnic he usually complained about. That day, I finally stopped pretending and started observing. After that, I noticed everything. The gym membership charge, not for the gym 3 blocks away, but one in Fremont, conveniently near Evelyn's neighborhood. The suspicious timing of every Peterson account emergency, always aligning with Nathan's overseas trips. The Thursday before that fateful dinner at my mother's, Dominic called around 7 p.m. to say he'd be home late again. His tone was forced casual, every word too carefully delivered. "Peterson's being difficult about the quarterly reports," he said. "Don't wait up." I stood in the kitchen holding the lasagna I'd just finished, his favorite, made with the homemade sauce that takes 3 hours, and replied simply, "Okay." That was all. Just okay. Because what else could I possibly say? I ate dinner alone at our small table, scrolling through his social media feed and realizing he had liked every one of Evelyn's posts from the past month, beach selfies, morning coffee photos, and all those carefully staged quotes about following your heart and life being too short for regrets. Each little heart emoji felt like a quiet betrayal, a breadcrumb trail leading to the truth I already sensed. When Nathan called me at 2:48 a.m. from Dubai International Airport, his voice was steady, almost too steady. In that moment, I understood we had both been watching our marriages fall apart from different continents, him from hotel rooms somewhere in the Middle East, and me from the cold half of our bed in Seattle. "I just bought a ticket home," he said after our brief exchange. "I've been gathering proof for weeks. My sister Tessa has been sending me screenshots from Evelyn's Instagram stories, but I needed something solid. And I just gave it to you," I replied, my voice calm in the darkness of our apartment. "Ruby," Nathan said quietly, and I could hear the weight of what followed. "Thank you for not letting me stay the fool any longer than I had to." We ended the call without a goodbye, two strangers tied together by the same betrayal, about to navigate the ruins left behind by people who had stopped loving us long before we realized it. I sat in the dark, Dominic's ultimatum still glowing on my phone, and understood that this moment hadn't arrived suddenly. It had been building for months, through every receipt, every angled phone screen, every late-night shower, all of it leading to 2:47 a.m. on a random Wednesday, when the act finally ended and the truth stepped into the light. The following Monday, the credit card statement came, slipped between grocery flyers and the water bill. I nearly missed it, would have, if Nathan's call hadn't sharpened my attention. My hands were steady when I tore open the envelope, but they started to tremble once I saw what was inside. FitCore Gym. Monthly membership. $180. The address was in Fremont, not anywhere near our apartment, but only 3 blocks from Evelyn's Colonial on Maple Avenue. That evening, Dominic came home with a fresh spark, his shirt clinging to him in a way that revealed new muscle. His shoulders looked broader, his waist leaner. I'd noticed the changes before but had blamed stress, maybe a shift in habits, fewer beers, perhaps. Now the pattern was clear, the 5 a.m. alarms, the gym bag that lived permanently in his car, the protein shakes filling our fridge. "Maybe we should start working out together," I said casually, folding the credit card statement and leaving it on the counter where he couldn't miss it. "There's a new place on Pine Street offering a couple's deal." He stood at the sink washing an apple, his back to me. His shoulders stiffened. "I prefer working out alone," he said after a pause. "It's my thinking time, a way to clear my head before the day gets busy." "Fremont's a long drive for thinking," I said evenly. The apple stopped under the running water. He shut off the faucet slowly and turned to face me. "It's near the office," he said finally. "I go before work sometimes." But his office was downtown, nowhere near Fremont. We both knew it. He took a bite of the apple, the crunch echoing in the quiet kitchen, then walked past me without another word. The statement stayed where I'd left it, untouched, unacknowledged, a silent lie resting between us. 2 weeks later came my sister Amelia's wedding, a test I was never meant to pass. The invitation had been on our refrigerator for months, the Fairmont Hotel downtown, a black tie event. I had bought a navy blue dress with delicate beading. Dominic had promised we'd make a weekend of it, stay at the hotel, and have brunch the next morning like we used to when we were dating. That morning, while adjusting his tie, he said, I checked the rates. It's $300 a night. We should probably just drive home after. Amelia's wedding is once in a lifetime, I said quietly, though I already knew what he'd say next. We'll stay for the ceremony and dinner, but I've got an early meeting Monday. Need to prepare on Sunday. His reflection didn't meet mine. At the reception, I watched Amelia and her new husband, Marcus, share their first dance. Dominic stood beside me with his hand resting on my lower back, the same performative gesture he'd perfected. During the salad course, my cousin Harper leaned close, her voice soft. Everything okay with you too? She asked while Dominic was at the bar. He seems distracted. Work's been demanding, I said automatically, the excuse too practiced to sound believable anymore. She nodded, but her eyes were full of quiet concern. If you ever need to talk. Dominic returned just as the main course arrived. His phone buzzed. He glanced at it, frowned, and said, I need to take this. Peterson's having another crisis. He walked toward the lobby, already on the call, running his hand through his hair, a nervous habit I knew too well. 10 minutes passed. Then 15. Our food went cold. When he came back, his shirt was slightly untucked, his hair a little messy. Peterson okay? I asked. Yeah, just had to go over some numbers, he said, sitting down quickly, his eyes on his phone again. Twice more during the reception, he excused himself for urgent calls. Each time, he returned with some small change, a collar shifted, a trace of unfamiliar perfume, his wedding ring turned just enough to look recently removed. During the bouquet toss, while all the single women gathered on the dance floor, Harper stood beside me. Dominic's been gone a while, she said quietly. He had left for his third call nearly 20 minutes earlier. Through the ballroom windows, I saw him pacing in the lobby, phone to his ear, his gestures too animated to belong to any business call. Ruby, Harper whispered, you deserve better than whatever this is. I wanted to defend him, to insist she didn't understand, that work really was stressful, but the words wouldn't come. Instead, I watched him through the glass, wondering who was on the other end of that conversation. Who was worth missing my sister's wedding for? The next Thursday, our book club meeting ended early. We had read a thriller about a woman discovering her husband's double life, and the discussion had turned uncomfortable, too many glances cast my way. I left before dessert, claiming a headache, and drove home in silence. When I pulled up, the windows of our apartment glowed softly in the dark, strange, considering Dominic had texted earlier that he would be working late again. I climbed the stairs as quietly as I could, slipping my key into the lock without making a sound. The door opened to reveal Dominic on the couch with his laptop open, the glow from the screen casting pale light across his face. He was video chatting with someone. I couldn't see who, but the voice that drifted from the speakers was unmistakably female, light, familiar, and laughing. The moment he noticed me standing there, he slammed the laptop shut so fast I half expected to hear the screen crack. You're home early, he said, standing too quickly, tension obvious in the stiffness of his shoulders. Book club ended early, I replied, setting my purse on the counter. That was when I started noticing the details I'd missed in my rush to come in, 2 wine glasses on the coffee table. The one had been pushed hastily behind a stack of magazines. A candle burned on the mantel, not one of ours, but something new and expensive, smelling of jasmine and vanilla. The couch pillows were rearranged into a neater, cozier setup than usual. Who are you talking to? I asked. Derek, he answered immediately. He's planning something for your birthday, wanted my input on restaurants. My birthday was still 4 months away. Derek had never planned anything for it in the 5 years we'd known him. But Dominic's explanation came out quickly, a stream of words about surprise parties, secret plans, and how he wanted to make this year special. The candle flickered between us, its unfamiliar scent filling the room. I walked into the kitchen, noting the open wine bottle on the counter, a Pinot Noir that hadn't been there that morning. 2 glasses, one rinsed and placed in the drying rack. Derek drinks beer, I said softly. He's trying to be more sophisticated, Dominic replied, but his voice had gone flat. The next morning, I found the candle in the bathroom trash, wrapped in newspaper as if he were hiding evidence. The glasses were loaded into the dishwasher, the cycle already run overnight, as though a wash cycle could erase what had happened while I'd been discussing fictional infidelity at book club. 3 days later came Nathan's farewell party at the office. Evelyn had organized it, of course, printing photos of his project milestones, arranging catering from his favorite Thai restaurant. She wore a black dress that felt too elegant for a workplace send-off, her makeup flawless despite the tears she kept dabbing away. 6 months, she said to the gathered group, voice trembling, 6 whole months without him. Nathan stood beside her, his arm awkwardly around her waist, looking uncomfortable under her display of emotion. When our eyes met across the room, there was a flicker of mutual recognition, 2 people witnessing the same performance. As the crowd began to mingle, Nathan approached me near the coffee station. Ruby, I wanted to ask a favor. He pulled out his phone to add my number. Would you mind checking in on Evelyn once in a while? She says she'll be fine, but 6 months is a long time. Of course, I said, saving his number. I'll keep an eye on things. Behind him, I saw Dominic place his hand on Evelyn's shoulder and lean in to whisper something that made her laugh through her tears. My stomach tightened. By Thanksgiving, 3 months after Nathan's departure, the air had turned sharp and cold, 38 degrees, according to my dashboard. My parents' house glowed warm against the dark, windows fogged with the scent of dinner. I sat in my car for a moment before going in, checking my phone one more time. Dominic's last text from 2 hours earlier read, running late. Start without me. Inside, my mother Vera had set the dining room with her best china and folded the napkins into swans. My father Cullen was in his recliner watching football. My brother Trevor and his wife Elise were already there with their twins, the house filled with laughter, the smell of turkey, the comfort of routine. Where's Dominic? My mother asked as she handed me the green bean casserole. He'll be here soon. Work emergency. The lie came easily now. By 6 o'clock, we couldn't wait any longer. The twins were restless, and the turkey was starting to dry out. We sat down, Dominic's empty chair a silent accusation. My father cleared his throat and said grace, his tone edged with quiet disappointment. At 7:15, my phone buzzed. Evelyn's car broke down. Helping her get to a mechanic. Don't wait up. I read it twice, then placed the phone face down. Of course, Evelyn's car on Thanksgiving night, when every mechanic in Seattle was closed and Nathan was halfway around the world. The table fell silent. Everyone pretended to focus on their plates, though I could feel their glances toward the empty chair beside me. Everything all right, honey? My mother asked, resting her hand over mine. Her tone was gentle, but her eyes were sharp. Dominic's helping a coworker with car trouble, I said, cutting my turkey into tiny pieces I never ate. My father set down his fork with deliberate precision. The sound was louder than it should have been. He said nothing he didn't need to. After 37 years of marriage, Cullen Morrison had never missed a family dinner for someone else's problem. By 8 o'clock, my mother was wrapping leftovers in foil, labeling each with masking tape. For Dominic, she said softly, though we both knew he wouldn't eat them. She pressed a container of stuffing into my hands and led me into the kitchen while the others watched football. Marriage is hard work, sweetheart, she whispered as she washed already clean dishes. But it shouldn't be this hard. The drive home felt endless. Every red light stretched time, giving me too long to imagine where Dominic really was, what lies he was telling now. The apartment was dark when I arrived, cold in that particular way that only an empty home can be. I placed the labeled leftovers in the refrigerator and went to bed alone. Dominic slipped into bed at 1 a.m., smelling faintly of wine and a perfume I didn't wear. His breathing was steady, feigned, the act of someone pretending to be asleep. The following Tuesday, I sat in Dr. Patel's exam room, the blood pressure cuff tightening around my arm. The reading was higher than it should have been for a 32-year-old woman. Dr. Patel had been my physician for 6 years. She had seen me through a miscarriage, Dominic, and I no longer knew my health better than I did. The anxiety medication doesn't seem to be working, I told her quietly. My hands twisted tightly in my lap. I can't sleep, I admitted. My heart races for no reason. It feels like I'm waiting for something terrible to happen. Dr. Patel set down her tablet, studying me with that blend of professional focus and quiet compassion only seasoned doctors seem to master. Ruby, she asked softly, is everything okay at home? That simple question cracked something open inside me, something I had been holding together so tightly it had hardened. The words spilled out before I could stop them. The late nights. The gym membership in Fremont. The dinner receipts for meals I never ate. The way Dominic looked through me instead of at me. I told her about the wine glasses for two that appeared while I was gone, about Evelyn's tears at Nathan's farewell party, about Thanksgiving dinner with an empty chair no one wanted to acknowledge. Dr. Patel passed me a box of tissues I hadn't realized I needed, then leaned back in her chair. What you're describing sounds like situational anxiety, a response to prolonged emotional stress, she said gently. I can adjust your medication, but Ruby, medicine can't heal a relationship that's harming you. She wrote 2 prescriptions, one for a higher dose of my anxiety medication and another for a therapist, Dr. Lila Monroe. Then she opened a drawer and handed me several pamphlets, recognizing emotional abuse, gaslighting in relationships, when love hurts. I'm not saying this is what's happening, she added carefully. But education is never a mistake. And remember, taking care of your mental health isn't admitting failure. It's choosing survival. I left with a small paper bag full of resources I couldn't bring myself to read in the parking lot. The therapy referral stayed buried in my purse for a week before I finally made the call. The next rupture in my careful denial came from Tessa Hart, Nathan's sister. She phoned my work line one Wednesday afternoon, her voice cautious, as if she were approaching a frightened animal. Ruby, I hope I'm not overstepping, but I need to tell you something. My stomach dropped. Is Nathan okay? Nathan's fine, she said quickly. It's about Evelyn and your husband. The office suddenly felt too small, the air too heavy. I could hear my coworkers typing, carrying on with their normal lives while mine started to tilt. What about them? I managed. Evelyn has a private Instagram account, Tessa continued. She thinks I don't follow it, but I do under a fake name. She's been posting photos. Ones that suggest things. She hesitated. God, I don't even know how to say this. Just say it, I whispered. There are pictures of them together. Captions like finding happiness in unexpected places and when you know, you know. I took screenshots. I can send them to you or we could meet for coffee. No, I said too sharply. Then softer, thank you. But I can't. Not yet. Tessa paused. I understand. But Ruby, you're not imagining this. What you suspect, it's real. And when you're ready to see the proof, I'll be here. After she hung up, I sat at my desk staring blankly at my monitor. Janet from accounting came by to drop off reports and found me frozen. Honey, you okay? She asked, and from her tone I knew she already suspected the answer. 2 weeks later, when the corporate Christmas party rolled around, I'd stopped pretending, even to myself. The Fairmont's ballroom glittered in gold and silver. A jazz quartet played soft standards while waiters glided between tables. The open bar became Dominic's orbit almost immediately. I wore a red dress I'd bought to remind him I still existed, but when I emerged from the bathroom that night, he barely looked at me. We had come separately, he straight from work, me from home, and when I entered the ballroom, I spotted them instantly, Dominic and Evelyn by the dessert table, her hand resting lightly on his chest, her laughter bright against the music. They weren't hiding anymore. During the CEO's speech about company values and integrity, I watched them gravitate toward each other like magnets. When the dancing began, they stayed on the floor for every slow song, his hand resting too low on her back, her face nestled against his shoulder. Our colleagues tried to pretend they didn't see, but the whispers and exchanged glances told the truth. Janet appeared at my side during the Way You Look Tonight, pressing a gin and tonic into my hand. "My Uber's coming in 20 minutes, she murmured. "You're welcome to share it." I stared at my husband swaying with another woman to the same song we had danced to at our wedding. Evelyn's eyes were closed, smiling faintly. Dominic's gold wedding band caught the light as his hand moved slowly along her back, the same band I had slipped onto his finger with such hope, now nothing but decorative metal. "Make it 15 minutes, I told Janet quietly. Outside, the December air cut like glass. As we waited for the car, Janet squeezed my shoulder. "You know the whole office knows, right?" she said gently. "We've all been wondering when you'd finally be done with his garbage." I thought about Dr. Patel's pamphlets, about Tessa's voice on the phone, about my mother's carefully labeled leftovers and my father's silence at Thanksgiving, about the cold bed and the slow erosion that had hollowed me out. The unraveling was almost complete. Soon, there would be nothing left to undo. When the Uber dropped me home that night, something in me had shifted. Not shattered, just moved, like the earth before an earthquake. I stood in the dark apartment, still wearing the red dress he hadn't noticed, and made a quiet promise to myself. If my marriage was going to end, it would end on my terms. Camilla Rhodes's office occupied the 17th floor of a glass tower downtown, minimalist, modern, efficient. I had found her through a coworker's whispered recommendation over lunch, the kind of tone people use when talking about serious illness. The Wednesday after Christmas, I sat across from her mahogany desk as she took neat, precise notes, her reading glasses low on her nose. "Tell me everything," she said, pen poised. So I did. The gym membership in Fremont, the missed holidays, the overnight bags, the Christmas party where they danced to our wedding song. Camilla's face remained neutral, but her notebook filled page after page, broken only by the occasional hum of acknowledgement. "You've been documenting things?" she asked when I finished. I nodded and unlocked my phone, showing her the folder I'd created, screenshots of credit card charges, photos of receipts, message threads, and a spreadsheet cross-referencing Dominic's supposed work emergencies with Nathan's travel dates. The pattern was undeniable. They aligned with disturbing precision. Camilla set down her pen and looked directly at me. "Ruby," she said, her tone both firm and reassuring, "you've been smart, smarter than most clients who walk through this door. The documentation will help, but now we need to protect you financially before he realizes what's happening." She explained Washington's divorce laws with calm precision, translating complexity into clarity, community property, spousal support, and, thankfully, the apartment lease that carried only my name. A decision I'd made before marriage, back when my credit had been stronger than Dominic's. "You can legally remove him from the lease with 30 days' notice, since you're the sole leaseholder," she said, sliding a form across the desk. "I suggest you do it quietly. File it directly with your property management company. Don't tell him until you're ready for him to know." Then came her list, a sequence of steps that felt more like small acts of revolution. Open a personal bank account. Secure all important documents. Change every password. Install security cameras for your own safety, she added, her eyes steady. Washington is a two-party consent state for audio recording, but video in your own home is perfectly legal. I left her office carrying a folder full of instructions and something I hadn't felt in months. Control. The elevator ride down felt like descending into battle, but for the first time, I wasn't unarmed. The next morning, I walked into a Chase Bank branch, not our usual Bank of America, where Dominic knew the tellers by name. This one, tucked in Ballard, was far enough from our regular paths that I wouldn't risk a familiar face. The new account specialist, a young woman named Amy with calm eyes and discreet professionalism, didn't ask why I wanted a separate account despite mentioning my marriage. "We see this a lot," she said quietly, fingers gliding across the keyboard. "Would you like paperless statements?" "Yes," I replied. "Everything electronic." She helped me transfer exactly half of our joint savings, $11,200. Money that had once been our vacation fund, now repurposed as an escape plan. A down payment for a house I'd never buy with Dominic. The debit card would arrive at my office in 7 to 10 business days. The checkbook, which I knew I'd never use, went into my purse like contraband evidence. As I walked out of Chase, my phone buzzed. A message from Dominic. "What's for dinner?" I typed back, "Working late tonight. Fend for yourself." The lie came easily, perhaps because I'd learned from an expert. I stopped at a quiet cafe nearby, ordering chamomile tea. My hands trembled slightly as I handed over my new debit card for the first time. The transaction went through, a small, almost invisible victory, but it felt like breathing freely after being underwater for too long. The security cameras arrived 2 days later, during Dominic's early morning workout in Fremont. The box was heavier than I expected: 4 cameras, a central hub, and a coil of cables waiting to be hidden. The night before, while he slept beside me, I had watched tutorial videos about camera placement, motion sensors, and blind spots. The first camera went up in the living room, angled toward the front door. The second in the kitchen, covering the dining area. A third faced our bedroom hallway. The fourth I tucked carefully into the bookshelf, nearly invisible among the paperbacks, covering the corner where Dominic usually sat with his laptop. Within minutes, my phone screen came alive with 4 live feeds, the apartment from every angle, empty and still. I could check them from anywhere, record automatically, and receive alerts whenever motion was detected. The first test came that same evening, Dominic arriving home at 6 p.m. As usual, carrying nothing but his phone. The next Wednesday, though, the cameras caught something different, him packing an overnight bag at 3 in the afternoon, when he was supposedly in back-to-back meetings. He folded his clothes carefully, the gray sweater I'd given him for Christmas, his best jeans, the cologne reserved for special occasions. Unexpectedly, a quiet network of support began forming around me. Janet from accounting started forwarding me things without being asked: expense reports, dinner receipts for 2, hotel charges during lunch hours, Uber rides to Fremont. Her subject lines were always the same: "Thought you should see this." Marcus, our building's doorman, began greeting me with an extra touch of warmth. One evening, as I picked up the mail, he said casually, "Your husband left early this morning, around 5 a.m. I hope everything's all right with that work emergency." There had been no emergency. Dominic had told me he was going to the gym. "Thanks, Marcus," I said, understanding exactly what he meant to give me. These tech companies always have some crisis. Even Elaine, the barista downstairs, had noticed. She'd made my morning latte for 2 years, extra shot on Mondays, always remembered my name. "You okay, honey?" she asked one morning, handing me my drink. "You seem different lately." "Stressed." "Just work stuff," I said automatically. She nodded slowly. "That husband of yours used to come in every morning. Haven't seen him in months. Guess he switched to that Fremont place. Lighthouse Coffee, right?" Before I could respond, she pulled out her phone and showed me Dominic's public Instagram. There he was, tagged at Lighthouse Coffee, the post courtesy of someone named Evelyn Underbear 47. "Men," Elaine muttered, shaking her head. "They think they're so clever." By New Year's Eve, just 2 days away, I had a complete filing system. One folder for bank statements, another for screenshots, another for camera footage. Every document labeled and backed up to the cloud. A timeline, just as Camilla had advised. Evidence of a marriage slowly collapsing, and of the woman quietly preparing to survive it. I maintained contact information for 3 other divorce attorneys besides Camilla, just in case. The business card for Dr. Lila Monroe, the therapist Dr. Patel had recommended, was finally pinned to my bulletin board instead of hidden in my purse. Each piece of documentation, every printout, every password change, all of it became another brick in the wall I was quietly constructing between my old life and whatever waited beyond it. Dominic had no idea that while he was busy building his affair, I was engineering my escape. He still kissed my forehead every morning, that distracted, habitual gesture that had long since lost its warmth. Still murmured "love you" on his way out, the words hollow, mechanical. He still came home smelling faintly of jasmine and vanilla, Evelyn's perfume, now woven into the scent of his clothes. But I was no longer the woman sitting by a cold plate of lasagna, waiting for apologies that never came. I had become the woman with hidden cameras recording his deceptions, bank accounts he didn't know existed, and a lawyer's number memorized. The war hadn't officially begun, but my arsenal was ready, every form filed, every dollar secured, every ally identified. The apartment felt different now, though nothing had changed in its decor. It wasn't ours anymore. It was a surveillance zone. Every room had secrets, the hidden cameras, the new folders of bank statements, the legal forms tucked inside my jewelry box. I moved through it like a spy in enemy territory, gathering intelligence for a confrontation that felt as certain as dawn. New Year's Eve arrived wrapped in a bitter cold that kept Seattle inside. Dominic said he was heading to Derek's party around 9. He kissed my forehead, a gesture that felt more like punctuation than affection. Derek was in Tahoe with his girlfriend I knew because his Instagram had been broadcasting ski slopes all day. I said nothing, only watched Dominic adjust his collar in the hallway mirror, spritzing on cologne like armor against guilt. When the door closed behind him, the silence felt cleaner than his presence. I poured myself a glass of Malbec we'd been saving for a special occasion and decided this one qualified. Midnight came and went without a message, without a call, without the obligatory champagne promise of a new beginning. Outside, fireworks bloomed above the city, but I sat in darkness, the only light coming from my laptop. A folder named Forever blinked back at me. Inside were our wedding photos, 5 years of naive devotion neatly archived. I opened it at 12:47 a.m., scrolling through frozen moments of two people who had once believed in forever. His eyes had been soft then, his smile real. I looked radiant in lace, so certain I'd found my home in another person. Delete. The beach ceremony vanished. Delete. Our first dance disappeared. Delete. The cake cutting, his mother's tears, my father's proud smile, gone. Each deletion felt surgical, precise, painful. By 1:30 a.m., the folder was empty. 5 years compressed into nothing but digital absence. I closed the laptop and walked into the living room, unable to face the bed where his pillow had become a void. The apartment glowed dimly on my phone screen, the 4 live feeds from the cameras, their timestamps marking time like a silent countdown. The coffee maker called to me. Sleep was impossible now. The brew was bitter, too strong, but I drank it black, my hands steady as I scrolled through my phone. Dominic's location showed him exactly where I knew he'd be, Evelyn's house. Not Derek's, not downtown. Her colonial on Maple Avenue, where Nathan's framed photos still lined the hallway and a nursery waited for a baby he'd never meet. At 2:15 a.m., I reopened my laptop and pulled up the document I'd been compiling for Camilla, Timeline of Dominic's Deception. Each entry was dated, detailed, clinical. I typed the newest note, January 1st, 12 a.m. Dominic claims to be at Derek's party. Derek is in Tahoe. Location shows Maple Avenue, Fremont. I was still typing when my phone erupted at 2:47 a.m., that specific alert tone Dominic had set for himself, reserved for emergencies only. The sharp sound sliced through the stillness. My fingers froze. The message glowed on the screen. I'm at Evelyn's house. Pick me up or it's over. The ultimatum pulsed with arrogance, like he still believed I was waiting to rescue him. He wanted me to cross the city in the middle of the night, to retrieve him from the wreckage of his own infidelity, as if I were still playing the dutiful wife. I read it once. Twice. A third time. Each repetition hardened something that had long been liquid in my chest. This was it, the precise moment when everything crystallized. My reply was calm, detached, final. It's over then. 4 words, no anger, no explanation, just truth. But I wasn't finished. Nathan's contact was already in my phone. We'd exchanged numbers months earlier when he'd asked me to check on Evelyn while he was abroad, an irony that now felt poetic. With surgical precision, I forwarded Dominic's location pin, adding one line. Thought you should know where your wife is entertaining my husband at 2:47 a.m. You're in Dubai, right? The moment I hit send, my phone lit up again, Dominic's name flashing across the screen, the photo from 2 years ago when he still looked at me instead of through me. I let it ring, counting the vibrations against the coffee table. Decline. He called again. Decline. Again, decline. Then Evelyn's number appeared. Decline. Then an unknown number, probably her landline. Decline. The phone turned frantic, vibrating and flashing, a chaos of desperate calls and incoming messages. It looked almost theatrical, like a slot machine spitting coins, the sound of his panic echoing against the calm I'd waited months to find. I picked up the phone and stared at the chaos of notifications for a long moment, the flashing icons, the flood of messages, the endless vibrations. Then I pressed and held the power button until the screen went black. The silence that followed felt almost sacred, like the pause after confession when the weight of guilt is supposed to lift. Except I wasn't asking for forgiveness. I was granting it to myself. The bedroom greeted me differently that night. The bed felt larger without the weight of waiting for Dominic. His pillow no longer mocked me with its untouched indentation. It was just fabric and stuffing now, meaningless without the person who had once claimed it. I slipped under the covers and stretched into the center of the mattress, no longer bound to my habitual edge. For the first time in 6 months, maybe longer, I slept deeply. Not that half-conscious vigilance I had called rest, but real, unbroken sleep where my mind finally released its death grip on awareness. I dreamed of wide, empty rooms with white walls. I painted them in colors Dominic would hate, deep burgundy, midnight blue, that shadowy green that feels like a forest breathing in twilight. I dreamed of silence, too, not the anxious kind filled with waiting and wondering, but pure quiet, stripped of questions about where he was or who he was with. Morning arrived with sunlight spilling through the uncovered windows. No alarm. No dread. My body woke naturally at 7. The stillness in the apartment had changed its tone, no longer heavy, no longer watchful. It was peace, clean and whole. I brewed coffee in the French press, measuring the grounds carefully, waiting the full 4 minutes for it to steep. My phone sat on the counter, still powered off, a black mirror reflecting nothing. The urge to check it flickered and died. I wasn't ready to let that noise back in. Not yet. Instead, I sat at the kitchen table and watched the city below begin its morning rituals, people walking dogs, buses grumbling through the streets, joggers pushing through the cold. Life went on as if nothing had happened. But mine had detonated overnight and reassembled into something entirely new. The coffee was perfect. Balanced. Strong. Everything felt sharper now, more defined, as though I had been living behind frosted glass, and someone had finally wiped it clean. At 8 o'clock, I finally turned the phone back on. It buzzed for 30 straight seconds as notifications poured in: 23 missed calls, 57 text messages, 19 voicemails. The numbers felt less like distress and more like a score, and I had already won. The first voicemail was timestamped 2:48 a.m. "Baby, please, I can explain," Dominic's voice pleaded. "It's not what it looks like. Evelyn had too much to drink, and I was just making sure she got home safe. Please call me back." The second, at 3:15, was Evelyn's, her voice choked with fury and tears. "You vindictive witch. You've ruined everything. Nathan's coming home. You've destroyed my life." But the one that made me smile, truly, calmly smile, came at 3:45. "Ruby," Nathan said, his voice controlled but resolute. "I'm at Dubai International Airport. I've booked the first flight home. My lawyer will be in touch about the evidence. Thank you for having the courage to do what needed to be done." I set the phone down on the counter, his words echoing in the quiet, when I heard footsteps on the stairs outside. Heavy, uneven steps, the gait of a man who hadn't slept. Through the peephole, I saw Dominic standing there at 8:15 a.m., a ghost of himself. His shirt was the same one from the night before, wrinkled and half untucked, a spreading coffee stain across the chest. He held a gas station cup that trembled in his hand, the plastic lid loose and leaking. I opened the door but didn't move aside. The icy January air swept between us, carrying with it the stale scent of alcohol, cheap coffee, Evelyn's perfume, and panic. "Chris, thank God," he breathed, taking a hesitant step forward. I lifted a hand. "You can say what you need to from there." His expression fractured, surprise, confusion, hurt, anger, flickering through him like static on a broken television. "It's my apartment too," he said. "Actually, it's not." I reached to the side table and pulled out the document I had placed there days ago, waiting for this moment. "You were removed from the lease last week. 30 days notice was filed with management on December 28th. You have until January 27th to collect your belongings." I held out the paper, my hand steady. He didn't take it, just stared, blinking as if I'd spoken another language. The coffee cup slipped from his fingers, splattering across the concrete like a Rorschach test in liquid brown. "You can't do that," he muttered. "The apartment's in my name," I said evenly. "Always has been. My credit, my deposit, my signature. You were listed as an authorized occupant, a privilege I legally revoked." The words came out calm and measured, every syllable echoing Camilla's earlier guidance. "Your belongings will be available for pickup by appointment." His posture sagged, his knees seeming to fold under invisible weight. For the first time, I really saw him, not the polished marketing executive, not the charming husband, not even the liar I'd been living with. Just a 34-year-old man who had gambled everything and lost. "Evelyn kicked me out," he said finally, his voice small. "As soon as Nathan called, she threw my clothes on the lawn. Said I wasn't worth losing her marriage over. Said I was just entertainment while he was gone." I wanted to feel something, pity, vindication, maybe satisfaction. But what came instead was a cold, steady detachment, the same quiet clarity one feels watching a nature documentary. Predator becomes prey, the cycle completing itself. My phone buzzed in my hand, Tessa heart calling. "I should take this," I said, stepping back and beginning to close the door. "Ruby, please." "Your mother knows some good hotels," I said softly, then shut the door with a click that sounded like punctuation. Tessa's voice spilled through as soon as I answered. "Ruby, you have to hear this. Evelyn completely lost it. She's been throwing Dominic's things on the lawn for the past hour. The neighbors called the cops. They thought it was a domestic dispute. Through the window, I saw Dominic still standing there in the hallway, staring at the closed door like it might somehow open again. Evelyn's been playing both sides," Tessa continued breathlessly. "She never planned to leave Nathan. She just wanted attention while he was traveling." I looked at Dominic one last time, disheveled, defeated, discarded by the woman he'd ruined everything for, and felt nothing but relief. Because at last, the wreckage was no longer mine to clean. She literally called Dominic a placeholder in front of the police, her exact words. Said he was convenient, but replaceable. The irony was so sharp it almost felt scripted. Dominic had wrecked our marriage for a woman who viewed him as nothing more than a warm body to occupy time and space. He had been having an affair with someone who was also having an affair with him. "The best part," Tessa said, her voice laced with vindictive satisfaction, "is that Nathan's already contacted a divorce attorney from the airport. Evelyn's about to lose everything. The house, the cars, even her credit cards, they're all in his name. She's just an authorized user. She's finished." After we hung up, I made myself breakfast, a real one. Scrambled eggs, toast, orange juice. Not just coffee and adrenaline, the diet I'd been living on for months. Halfway through eating, my phone rang again. Elise Davenport, HR director at our company, technically also Dominic's, though we worked in different departments. "Ruby, I'm sorry to call on a holiday, but this is urgent," she said, her tone tight but professional. "We've received concerning information about irregularities in expense reports involving Dominic Morrison and Evelyn Hart. I understand you may have documentation that could assist our investigation." I set my fork down. "What kind of documentation?" "Receipts, credit card statements, anything that might show personal expenses charged to company accounts. We received an anonymous tip with Instagram screenshots, but we need to verify the timeline." Anonymous tip. Tessa again, efficient as ever. "I have everything," I said. Dates, locations, transaction amounts. All cross-referenced with client meetings that never happened. Elise exhaled audibly. Could you email them today? We're launching a formal investigation first thing Monday. I spent the next hour compiling the evidence, receipts from the Fremont gym, dinner charges on nights Dominic had claimed to be at the office, ride-share logs, hotel stays billed to corporate cards. 6 months of systematic misuse, funding his affair with company money. The email went out at 10:47 a.m. By 11:30, my phone rang again. Elaine Morrison. I almost ignored it. But curiosity won. She didn't bother with greetings. How could you? She demanded, her voice quivering between fury and tears. He's standing in my driveway destroyed, and you can't even forgive one mistake? Elaine, I said evenly, it wasn't one mistake. It was 6 months of deliberate deception. He was at another woman's house at 2:47 this morning. He's confused, she cried. He needs support, not abandonment. Marriage is about working through problems. He made his choice, I said, still calm. Over and over again. Her voice hardened, the sorrow crystallizing into venom. You're heartless. Absolutely heartless. Throwing him out like trash, ruining his reputation, humiliating him publicly. Heartless, I repeated, tasting the word. Heartless is what he did to me while Evelyn's husband was overseas working to support her. Heartless is lying to me every single day for half a year. Heartless is sending me an ultimatum from another woman's house at 2:47 a.m. You'll regret this, she hissed. I'll make sure everyone knows what kind of person you are. You'll pay for destroying my son. Your son destroyed himself, I said softly. I just stopped enabling it. Then I ended the call and deleted her number, another small act of freedom. By noon, my security app pinged. Motion detected. Through the live feed, I saw Dominic return with Derek in a rented moving van, loading the boxes I'd neatly packed and left in the building's mailroom, exactly as Camilla had instructed. He moved like an old man, shoulders hunched, his once confident stride reduced to slow shuffling. Derek spoke to him a few times, trying to offer something like comfort, but Dominic just kept his head down, stacking boxes of the life he'd dismantled. At one point, he looked up at our window, the camera zoom automatically adjusting, and for a moment he just stood there holding a box labeled wedding albums. I watched him through the lens, detached. It felt like observing weather from indoors, aware of the storm, untouched by it. When Derek's van finally pulled away, my phone buzzed again. Camilla. The court date is set, she said briskly. February 15th, 9 a.m. Bring everything we've discussed. Her voice carried the crisp satisfaction of a lawyer who knew the case was already won. The 6 weeks between that call and the courthouse felt like watching an avalanche unfold from a safe ridge, slow, unstoppable, inevitable. Dominic had hired a bargain attorney from a strip mall, the kind who handled DUIs and quick divorces. Elise from accounting had seen him outside Affordable Legal Solutions, looking 10 years older, exhaustion clinging to him like a second skin. And then February 15th arrived, gray, damp, perfectly Seattle. Camilla met me on the courthouse steps in her immaculate navy suit, her briefcase organized with surgical precision, financial records, credit card statements, Tessa's Instagram screenshots, and even the security footage of Dominic packing his work trip overnight bag. His lawyer tried to argue for spousal support, she said dryly as we climbed the steps together. I actually laughed out loud and then sent over the fraud documentation. The courtroom itself surprised me. Smaller than I'd expected. Not a theater of drama, just an office where justice quietly rearranged people's lives. Dominic sat at the opposite table wearing the same charcoal gray suit he'd worn to our wedding. I recognized the faint wine stain on the sleeve, a remnant from when my Uncle Robert had gotten overly enthusiastic during his toast. His attorney, a nervous man named Gary, kept rifling through papers as though salvation might be hiding between them. Judge Elaine Torres presided with the composed authority of someone who had seen every variety of marital catastrophe imaginable. Her gaze was steady, her tone clipped, her patience finite. Camilla was flawless. She presented our case like a surgeon conducting an autopsy, every cut precise, every word deliberate. Receipts projected onto the courtroom screen, each timestamp aligned with calendar entries and Instagram posts. The credit card charges to boutique hotels during work hours, the Fremont gym membership, the restaurant bills marked as client dinners. Every piece of deception mapped out in chronological order, each one connecting to the next like a constellation of betrayal. Your Honor, Camilla said, laying another folder on the judge's bench, the respondent used marital assets to fund an extramarital relationship. Washington state law is explicit about the dissipation of assets. Every dinner, every hotel stay, every purchase made for Ms. Hart constitutes misappropriation of funds from the marital estate. Gary tried to object, but his voice faltered before it reached conviction. There was no defense to mount, not against the receipts, screenshots, and expense reports that told the story in brutal detail. With each piece of evidence, Judge Torres's expression cooled further. When Camilla displayed the security footage of Dominic packing an overnight bag while claiming to be working late, the judge exhaled through her nose, part disbelief, part exhaustion. Mr. Morrison, she said finally, her voice flat, did you truly believe your wife wouldn't notice $18,000 in unaccounted expenses over 6 months? Dominic mumbled something about stress, about mistakes. These aren't mistakes, the judge interrupted sharply. This is calculated deception and financial misconduct against your spouse. The ruling unfolded exactly as Camilla had predicted. The apartment, mine. The savings, mine. Half of Dominic's 401k, transferred to me. He retained his personal debts, including the hidden credit cards used for hotels and weekend trips. The judge also ordered him to pay my attorney's fees, another $8,000 he didn't have. Petition for dissolution granted, Judge Torres concluded. This marriage is dissolved. Walking out of that courthouse felt like stepping from a darkened theater into full daylight, eyes adjusting to brightness, lungs rediscovering air. Camilla shook my hand, congratulating me on being the kind of client lawyers dream of, organized, composed, and armed with impeccable documentation. In the parking lot, Dominic stood beside his car, papers clutched loosely in one hand, staring at them as if the ink itself might rearrange the outcome. For a brief moment, our eyes met across the rain-slicked asphalt. Then I turned away, slid into my car, and drove off, leaving him to stand there like a monument to his own ruin. 2 months later, March arrived with unexpected sunshine and a text from Nathan Hart. Coffee? I owe you a proper thank you. We met at a small cafe in Wallingford, neutral ground far from both our former lives. Nathan looked healthier than I remembered. Dubai's sun had brought color back to his face, and the absence of Evelyn's chaos had lifted years off him. He stood when I arrived, a gesture Dominic had abandoned long ago. You saved my life, he said simply, once our coffee was on the table. I would have spent years funding her affairs, thinking I was the problem. We saved each other, I corrected. Your call at 2:48 a.m. confirmed I wasn't losing my mind. He laughed, not bitterly, but freely. Evelyn's still posting Instagram quotes about resilience and rising from ashes. She's living with her mother in Tacoma, teaching yoga part-time. I pulled out my phone and showed him Dominic's latest LinkedIn update, professional pivots and lessons learned through adversity. We both laughed, that light, disbelieving laughter shared by people who've survived the same storm. He tried to contact me, Nathan admitted, stirring his coffee. Wanted to compare notes about Evelyn. As if we'd start some kind of support group for men who'd been conned. What did you tell him? Nothing. Blocked him. I'm not interested in bonding over mutual stupidity. We spent nearly 2 hours talking, comparing settlements, recounting absurd moments that only those scarred by the same absurd betrayal could understand. Before we left, we exchanged numbers again, not out of romance, but solidarity. 2 witnesses to the same wreckage who might occasionally need to remind each other it had really happened. The next test came at my parents' Sunday dinner. I finally told them everything, not the edited version I'd given months earlier, but the truth in full. The 2:47 a.m. ultimatum, Evelyn, the investigation, the affair, the court case. Trevor's knuckles went white around his beer bottle. I knew something was off at Thanksgiving, he muttered. I should have. You couldn't have, I cut in. My mother's grief had transformed into a kind of righteous fire. She'd gone from mourning the loss of her son-in-law to sharpening her fury on his memory. "I'm updating the Christmas card photos," she declared as we cleared dessert. "Already removed him from the last 3 years. Photo editing is a blessing." "Mom, you don't need to erase him," I said gently. "Oh yes, I do," she replied. "He erased himself from this family the day he chose someone else over my daughter." My father lifted his wine glass. "To Ruby's freedom." Everyone followed, Trevor, Elise, even the twins, clinking their juice boxes. The warmth of that moment filled spaces in me I hadn't realized were still cold. 3 weeks later, I ran into Derek at Whole Foods, Dominic's former best friend, now awkwardly adjusting his shopping basket between the avocados and the imported cheeses. "Ruby," he said, my name catching like a question. "Derek." He hesitated. "I should tell you, Dominic's in Portland now. Working at some startup with one of our college buddies. Entry-level marketing." "Entry-level," I repeated, the words tasting like closure. After 6 years as a senior account manager, the fall was complete. "He's dating someone," Derek continued, visibly uncomfortable but pushing through. "She's 24. Just graduated. Thinks he's sophisticated." I smiled faintly. "I hope she's smarter than I was." He shifted his weight, hesitant. "He talks about you sometimes. Says he wants closure." "To explain." "There's nothing to explain," I said quietly. "And closure isn't something he gets to take from me. It's something I gave myself at 2:47 a.m., the moment I stopped participating in his lies." I left Derek standing there with his party supplies, realizing at last that indifference was the purest and most complete form of closure. The Whole Foods encounter lingered for about 10 minutes before dissolving like sugar in rain. I finished my shopping, bought myself a bouquet of yellow tulips, flowers that belonged to no one but me, and drove home to the apartment that had become my sanctuary. The May afternoon stretched golden through my windows, and I opened them wide, letting the sounds of the city blend with my music. 6 months. 6 months since that 2:47 a.m. message had cracked my life open like an egg, letting something new and unexpected take shape. I'd started taking pottery classes on Thursdays, my hands learning to mold clay into bowls and vases that were imperfect but mine. I joined a hiking group that met on Sunday mornings, discovering trails I'd never explored during my married years spent waiting for Dominic to decide our plans. The first Saturday of June arrived bright and clear, the kind of sunshine that draws all of Seattle outdoors. Pike Place Market bloomed with crowds, and I wandered through slowly, with no schedule pushing me forward. Flower vendors called out prices, their buckets overflowing with peonies and roses. I was studying a cluster of sunflowers, broad-faced and unapologetic, when I felt that subtle change in the air that means someone is watching. Dominic stood 20 feet away near the fish-throwing station, his hand resting on the lower back of a young woman who looked freshly out of college. She had that glow of untested optimism, gazing up at him as he pointed toward something in the market. Her sundress was a hopeful yellow, the color of someone who still believes in happy endings. I recognized that expression. It had been mine 5 years ago, before I learned that some men treat love like a convenience store, taking what they need and leaving when something shinier opens down the street. He saw me. His hand dropped from her back, his body angling slightly toward me like a compass finding north. For a moment, I thought he might approach, might try to create some scene out of a movie where exes exchange meaningful words. His mouth opened, shaping the start of my name. I turned back to the sunflowers. "I'll take 6, I told the vendor, pulling cash from my wallet. Behind me, I could feel Dominic's presence like a shift in weather, but I didn't turn around. The vendor wrapped my sunflowers in brown paper, tied them neatly with twine, and handed them over with a smile. I walked past the fish throwers, through the crowd where Dominic still stood motionless. His new girlfriend tugged at his arm, asking questions I could easily imagine but didn't care to hear. My indifference wasn't an act. It was real as the sunflowers in my arms, as solid as the ground beneath my feet. Dominic had become a stranger, someone whose story no longer touched mine. And that truth tasted exactly like freedom. Monday morning brought Elise Davenport to my office, not my cubicle, but my actual office. The promotion had materialized in April, a quiet reward for surviving with grace. The board met Friday, she said, closing the door behind her. They're creating a new position, Director of Compliance and Ethics. It's yours if you want it. I set down my coffee carefully. Why me? Because you handled the investigation with complete professionalism while your personal life was imploding, she said. Because you maintained your work quality when most people would have collapsed. And because the board believes someone who can navigate that level of crisis while protecting company interests is exactly who should be preventing future ones. The irony was almost poetic. Dominic's fraud had created the need for this position, and my survival of his betrayal had made me the ideal person to fill it. The salary Elise mentioned made me grateful I was sitting down enough not just to survive, but to thrive, to travel, to save, to never again depend on anyone. There's one more thing, she added. The corner office on 17, the one overlooking Elliott Bay, it's yours. After she left, I stood in what would soon be my new office, watching ferries glide across the water like slow-moving promises. Success tasted different when you'd earned it, not in spite of disaster, but because of how you'd faced it. Every spreadsheet I'd completed while my marriage unraveled, every meeting I'd led while my life rebuilt itself, it had all counted. That evening, Seattle offered one of its signature summer rainstorms, sudden, cleansing, and alive. I opened every window in my apartment, letting the rain-scented air roll through the space. The apartment had transformed since January. New art covered the walls, pieces I had chosen without committee. Colors Dominic would have called too bold. Plants thrived in corners where his gaming setup used to dominate. Books were stacked freely on surfaces now, because I no longer needed to keep everything magazine perfect for someone who never noticed. Eventually, I found myself in the closet, pulling out the folder Camilla had given me during our final meeting. The divorce decree, stamped and official, felt like ancient history, even though only a few months had passed. I considered throwing it away, but instead slid it back inside, not as a reminder of pain, but as proof of survival. Outside, the rain intensified. I made tea and settled onto the couch, now arranged for one person's comfort, not two people's compromise. My phone rested silent on the coffee table, no longer a source of anxiety, no longer a trigger for questions about who Dominic was texting or what excuse he'd invent next. It was simply a device now, something that connected me to people who actually wanted me in their lives. That's when the realization arrived, complete and sudden, like the downpour outside. The 2:47 a.m. message hadn't been an ending, it had been a gift wrapped in barbed wire. Dominic's ultimatum, pick me up or it's over, had forced me to make the first honest choice I'd made in months, maybe years. I'd chosen myself. Not revenge, though that would have been easy. Not the cinematic confrontation movies teach us to crave. Just the quiet, revolutionary act of saying, it's over then, and meaning it. The peace I felt now wasn't the absence of conflict. It was the presence of truth. Every room in my apartment breathed honesty. Every plan I made reflected only my own desires. Every morning arrived free of the weight of deception. Revenge would have meant staying tied to his chaos, pouring energy into someone who had already taken too much. But consequences, those came naturally, like rain after drought. His job gone, lost to his own fraud. His mistress gone, once the thrill evaporated. His reputation gone, destroyed by his own documented choices. I hadn't needed to orchestrate any of it. Truth has its own momentum. I closed my eyes, listening to the rain against the windows, and realized something profound. I would never again wake at 2:47 a.m. to someone else's crisis disguised as my responsibility. That specific time had become sacred in reverse, the moment I chose peace over drama, silence over chaos, and myself over someone who had already chosen someone else. The young woman with Dominic at Pike Place would learn her own lessons in time. Derek would eventually stop feeling obliged to send me updates. Nathan and I would exchange the occasional text like veterans of the same war, quietly acknowledging how much better peace felt than battle. But tonight, in my apartment filled with art, plants, and silence that sounded like music, I understood the final truth. Peace tastes better than revenge because it's permanent. Revenge is a meal you consume once. Peace is a home you inhabit forever. And at 2:47 a.m., when Seattle sleeps and the world holds its breath, I sleep too, deeply, completely, and finally free.